I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Welcome to a special weekend edition of Spark the Conversation. This is your host, Mark the Spark, and today we're going to dig into none other than the deadliest day ever, January 6th. So if you've listened or watched this podcast before, you can tell that we've got a couple upgrades. We've got a new mic and audio setup. We've got some lights. We are ready to rock, and a new camera as well. So if you are a dedicated listener, I appreciate it. And we're stepping things up here just a little bit at a time. But today I want to cover January 6th. I actually got an email that came in recently from the Imprimis newsletter, which is sent out by Hillsdale College, which, if you've never checked them out, they're a great educational resource. Not only are they a real college dedicated to constitutional and conservative values, but they also have a lot of free educational material online and through emails, which is really great to dive into if you're interested in anything to do with the Constitution, Federalist Papers, the history of the United States, and a bunch of other topics. Really, really great. That you can learn about the Founding Fathers and even some more current issues that are going on. So, and it's all free online. So check it out, Hillsdale College. But they sent me a newsletter saying what we know and what we don't know about January 6th. 2021, of course, is the only January 6th that matters. But the important pieces are, going to start coming out soon. I think you're going to see more and more truth now that the Democrats have lost power and their ability to control the media, because the media, as we all know, is losing popularity pretty quickly. Jim Acosta has said sayonara, and because he didn't want to work midnights. Wolf Blitzer has taken his time slot, which I'm sure will quickly crash and burn as well. So that'll be entertaining to watch, because if they can't change their narrative and they keep going down the same path that people are tired of listening to, well, then guess what? They're all going to have the same results. Just kind of makes sense, right? So anyways, I've got a couple clips that we're going to roll through, and then we'll just kind of take some snippets out of this article, which are interesting to read. But, there's a lot that's been portrayed about this, and sure, it was a pretty bad day. I mean, there was a riot that occurred, and there were a lot of people. I don't know how many. It's really hard to tell how many people that, involved themselves in anything serious or really law-breaking, but there were definitely a handful. But there's a majority of these people that were prosecuted that really had minor, if any, infractions. In fact, a lot of them didn't realize they were doing anything illegal at all. And some of them weren't doing anything illegal. And at the very least, were subjected to entrapment by law enforcement. And, to be honest, I'm not sure that the communication and the planning on the ground for law enforcement was all that good, that, maybe they didn't know that they were supposed to be holding people out of a certain part of the building or off of certain parts of the grounds. So it's not really clear who knew what when, which is a famous line. What did you know and when did you know it, right? And I think it's key for all of this information to be properly investigated, unlike the January 6th committee that had to be, preemptively pardoned by Joe Biden because he knew what they did was wrong, clearly. But it's interesting. It'll be interesting as these investigations are properly done to see what actually comes out. And anybody who's sat down and watched through any of the video clips that have come out, and there are hours and hours of video that have been released, and I'm sure there's more out there, you could see that a lot of these people didn't really do anything that extreme or extreme at all. Some of them look like tourists just walking through the Capitol building. And so I'm going to play some of those clips. First, I'm going to play the rest of the clip that I started off this podcast with of Donald Trump, the key piece of his speech, where he tells them to go peacefully and patriotically to cheer on those that are upholding the, willing, that have the courage to uphold the Constitution. Here's the rest of that clip.
And only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity of our elections, but whether or not they stand strong for our country.
So you can see that his clear intent in this speech, as most of us probably already know, his clear intent is to, have people go and protest outside the Capitol building of what he knows is going to be the certification of an election that was at the very least coerced. We know now, of course, that the tech giants have come out and confirmed the fact that they were coerced into suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story at the very least. Okay? And there are so many other ways that they suppressed the ability of Donald Trump and his supporters to get out information that would have changed people's votes. That at the very least. And, Dinesh D'Souza came out with that documentary about, how ballots were harvested, and he used a lot of metadata and location data from cell phones I don't think he really proved, to be honest, that there was election fraud. But at the very least, there was a lot of circumstantial evidence that proved that there were improprieties. I mean, you would have to struggle pretty hard to be able to explain why a certain person's cell phone, which they were pinging, was in the area of a Dropbox numerous times in a day. The only thing that he was missing that would have proved that there was at least illegal ballot harvesting was video or pictures of the people doing the ballot harvesting at that Dropbox numerous times throughout the day and loading, multiple boxes of ballots into, these ballot boxes, which is illegal in some of those places. And we know that Pennsylvania changed its voter restrictions for mail-in ballots. Okay? As far as the signing your ballot, as far as, receiving them after the date they were supposed to receive them by. So those are the things we know. Okay? There were definitely some improprieties. And so Trump was upset, but he still told the people to go peacefully and patriotically, which destructing a government building is not patriotic, nor is it peaceful. So for you to say that he told the people to do this or implied it, man, I've heard a lot worse from the left. Maxine Waters is a great example. Chuck Schumer over Supreme Court justice nominations and acceptances. So, for them to say this, pull this on Donald Trump, and then they hounded on him for years and years. But anyways, I digress. The next two clips I'm going to show are different videos of different angles of people going into the Capitol building. And you can see in the videos different law enforcement officials either waving people in, moving barricades so people could get past, opening doors, chatting in a friendly manner with some of these protesters, who a lot of them are supporters of law enforcement, and turning their backs, essentially leading them into the Capitol. You'll also see people walking between the ropes where tourists would walk to go and just look at the Capitol building, which is generally allowed by the public. Besides the fact that this is the people's house. You'll also see people taking selfies, people smiling, people celebrating freedom. You'll also see some people breaking some rules. But I would argue that these are rules not typically enforced by sending these people to prison. Typically, these rules would be enforced by a guard saying, hey, get back over the rope. Hey, you can't enter that part. And not escalating beyond that. Maybe a removal from the premises, but no action beyond that. So anyways, I want you to watch these two clips and see what you get out of them.
Protesters onto the steps of Capitol Hill. Have you seen this? No one has explained what this was all about. And this happened all over Capitol Hill that day. You'll see in another portion here, these barricades being removed by police officers so these people can get inside the Capitol building. And then there were others, Capitol Hill police officers, just standing by. Just welcome to the Capitol. What was all of this about? What was all of this about? Also, and you've seen this by now, the Horns guy and others like him just allowed into the Senate.
The police here are willing to work with us and cooperate peacefully, like our First Amendment allows. Gather more Americans under the condition that they will come and gather peacefully to discuss what needs to be done to save our country.
You have a memory of anything near like this?
We just saw protesters walking through Statuary Hall, Claire. I just don't want to interrupt, but we just saw people going right through. There they are.
They were peaceful. They were orderly and meek. These were not insurrectionists. They were sightseers. Footage from inside the Capitol overturns the story you've heard about January 6th. Protesters queue up in neat little lines. They give each other tours outside the Speaker's office. They take cheerful selfies and they smile. They're not destroying the Capitol. They obviously revere the Capitol.
I have given warnings about chemical munitions. I need the less than lethal team positioned above me to start deploying. Launch! 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 You're on the wrong side!
At 2:36:54, the police allow the crowd to pass. At 2:38 p.m., a woman with a sock hat and a camera with a sound recording device attached to it films police as they allow people to enter. A steady stream of individuals pass by police as they stand aside without deterring protesters for several minutes. At 2:40 p.m., police stopped the protesters to speak to them again. At 2:44 p.m., a police officer in the bottom of the screen can be seen speaking to the officers in front of him and pulling them away, indicating to the crowd that they are allowed to enter. The officers then turn their backs to the crowd, which indicate that they did not possess fear of the protesters. The officers then escort the crowd into the interior of the Capitol. At 2:47 p.m., police wearing yellow gear closed the doors. Police presence.
So as you can see, just like I said, you see a lot of law enforcement acting in ways that would be, to easily taken as, allowing people to pass. And you see some law enforcement proactively allowing people to pass. There's also some video of law enforcement maybe taking action that was aggressive, inciting the crowd. You also will find videos of certain individuals who are taking illegal violent actions against against law enforcement. And that's condemned and should be punished. And those individuals, when looked at in the full breakdown of what occurred and what was done to them, should be taken into account and should be prosecuted. But where's the investigation for the only person killed that day, Ashley Babbitt, who was killed by law enforcement? And that investigation quickly ended, finding nothing had been done wrong by that law enforcement official. There's a good video to watch on that too. I would argue that if that law enforcement official was acting, within his bounds legally, then he should have had the right to shoot everybody around her as well. It also appeared that he put a fellow law enforcement official in danger by firing that shot in the close vicinity of that official. The next video I want to show you is, pointing at some of the other problems that were clear that day. One was that the National Guard had not been activated preemptively, knowing that this crowd of people was going to exist and was going to come out that day. Nancy Pelosi, this is a video that her daughter took, somehow got released. Interestingly enough, actually saw the light of day, which I find curious, because you'd think if her daughter knew she had this video, she would have deleted it, knowing that it made her mother look pretty guilty. In fact, her mother admits guilt, at least that some of this was her fault, that she didn't plan properly enough, and that she didn't activate the National Guard and make sure that law enforcement had the support they need if they were needed to secure this building. Here's that clip.
Have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous. You're going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the inaugural stuff that should we call the Capitol Police? The National Guard? Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
They thought that they had sufficient resources.
That is not a question of how they had been. They don't know. They clearly didn't know, and I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for more.
So it's kind of interesting to see that she says, I take responsibility for not having him there. But she really didn't take responsibility. We all know what it looks like when somebody takes responsibility. They stand up, they admit it in public, or at least to the people they're responsible for. Nancy Pelosi didn't do that. She turned around and denied that she ever even said these words. This next clip is an undercover video taken of Nancy Pelosi's daughter, pretty much laying out that what would be required to meet the definition of an insurrection didn't exist that day. She tells us that you need a plan, you need organization, you need guns. None of that existed that day. The people who were out of control did it on their own, independently. Some were incited by other individuals who were bad actors and should be punished. But I think it's pretty clear that they knew the lie they were telling the American people when they called January 6, 2021, an insurrection. which nobody was charged for. Interestingly enough. Here's that clip.
So what was the plan? Is that if there was an insurrection, you were supposed to be in line marching. You're in the military, you know this.
No, that's
you were supposed to have a plan.
Exactly. It's called Operation Soldier. You sit down overnight with your soldiers. You go over. All right, you're gonna go here. You're gonna go in by this side. At this time, we're gonna take over this. There's none of that.
If it was an insurrection, it's the sorriest insurrection in the 20th, 21st century ever. No guns.
A guy smoking pot.
I love the guy.
Yeah, I like.
Well, we do that. We just went to New Hampshire last week for the guy that just was drinking beer.
My favorite guy.
And her favorite guy is the guy smoking pot. But they said, you have military experience. Where was the plan? Where were the guns? No guns, no plan, no organization. How can we call that an insurrection? We know it wasn't. We know we're lying to the American people. We don't care. And we're going to keep doing it for 3-4 years. Maybe they're not done yet. We need a proper investigation of it. And it's going to happen under Donald Trump. And I look forward to it. Now, the last clip before I get into this article out of Hillsdale College is just a fun one because the Babylon Bee, thank God for Elon Musk buying X to save the Babylon Bee, the most expensive purchase known to man, the worst business investment ever, just to save a satirical publication. But we love the Babylon Bee here on Spark the Conversation. If nothing else, a great source of entertainment. I think it takes over what Saturday Night Live used to be before it was destroyed by leftist ideology, which doesn't allow for any humor. But here's a clip of, it's just a trailer of their new movie that they released. I guess you'd call it a mockumentary, right? Called January 6th, the most deadliest day. I think that's how they phrase it. We'll see.
Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the heat death of the universe. These are some of the deadliest days in history. But none of them compare to the most deadliest day. January 6, 2021. Coming soon in the most epic movie event since Robot Jocks, Left Behind, or maybe even Son of the Mask. The Babylon Bee investigates the darkest day in the history of democracy.
Where were you on January 6th?
In January?
I don't remember.
Storming the Capitol, baby. No.
Scary stuff like this happened.
Okay.
So on a scale of 9 to 10, how terrifying was what you just witnessed?
And the girl raises her hand and says, a 3? ? And, that is a good overview of what happened on January 6th. Because most of those 1,600 people, at least those were prosecuted, did similar things to just that. And of course, now it was found out that some of these videos were released to the January 6th committee without audio at all. So that the audio we got when the public viewed this video was manufactured to make the videos seem scary. So this article from the Babylon Bee says what we know and what we don't know about January 6th by John Daniel Davidson. He's a senior editor of The Federalist. And I'm just going to read some of this. Many ordinary Americans are left wondering what to believe. With those Americans in mind, it is helpful to sift through what we have learned about January 6th over the past 4 years and to note the things we still don't know. The official report of the House Select Committee, which runs more than 800 pages, is too deeply biased to give much help. Then, Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's 2 Republican appointments to the committee, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, and instead appointed 2 anti-Trump Republicans, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, One of, at least Liz Cheney got a preemptive pardon from Joe Biden. I'm not sure about Adam Kinzinger. But it omitted important information and failed to address many lingering questions about the government's role in response. In some instances, they showed a blatant disregard for facts. They claimed that Trump was aware of the violence at the Capitol for more than 3 hours before he took action to intervene. But no more than 25 minutes passed between a reported breach of the Capitol and Trump's first tweet addressing the situation. So the first breach was at 2:13 p.m. and his first tweet was at 2:38. And he wrote, "Please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful." So 25 minutes now is what it really came down to. 30 minutes later, he went to Twitter again. It says, "I'm asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you." So we know that there's some significant errors in what's been released to the public and what was in the reports from this committee. You know, this article goes on about what we know. It says tens of thousands of Trump supporters gathered for a rally on the Ellipse. And then, you know, as we saw in the clip, Trump says to peacefully and patriotically go and protest at the Capitol. Before he had even finished speaking, there was a small group gathering at the Capitol building. Security video was released by Tucker Carlson, and that's another clip that we watched earlier. And shows that after the chaos subsided, Capitol Police were ushering people into the building. They say that some of these people were unaware of the earlier clashes with police. And because they assumed they were being waved in, they were allowed to be there. Makes sense. They said that this guy, Jacob Chansley, who is known as the QAnon shaman, the guy with the bullhorns. He was sentenced to 41 months in prison. 9 police officers were seen escorting him around the Capitol. At several points, even checking for unlocked doors for him. They did not hinder him, not apprehend him. Then they're saying about the footage showing Brian Schicknick. He's the one who died January 7th. They said that shows him walking around apparently healthy on January 6th. Then a month after his death, there was a medical exam showed him that he died of natural causes. The Democrats still point to him as dying because of the riots. But, there was even in blunt force trauma. The Democrats are pushing a fake narrative that he died from blunt force trauma from a fire extinguisher. There was no security footage that showed this. In fact, the footage shows otherwise, that it didn't happen. And there was also a report that he was on a phone call with his brother later and never mentioned anything about it. There's also a report from the Office of the Inspector General saying that there were 26 confidential human sources or informants in the crowd that day. Most were there not on the request of the FBI, according to them. But there was one FBI informant who was reimbursed by the FBI for his travel expenses to and from Washington. That idea was previously called a conspiracy theory. So we know that there were informants in the crowd, and one of which at least we know that expenses were paid for him to be there. So, there is also a story about Ray Epps, of course, who we assume we don't assume, but we have always suspected that he was an asset of the FBI who was instigating people. Well, there's many videos of him instigating riots and violence within the crowd. And the Democratic Party and the January 6th committee showed no interest in finding out that information. So we don't know that justice was served. That's the end. I mean, there's a lot more in this article, and there's a lot of video footage out there that you can go look for yourself. But I think these clips are pretty representative of the majority of the 1,600 people that President Trump pardoned. And I can tell you that most of the people in this group are better people than the 1,500 or so that Joe Biden pardoned in his last day in office. And they're way better people than at least one of those individuals who was raped and murdered a victim. I mean, that's unbelievable, but nobody will mention that. And they're way better than people than some of these illegal immigrants who have committed serious crimes. One of the reasons why the Democratic Party won't say a name like Laken Riley, which is the first bill that President Trump signed out of Congress in his second term. So these are some of the things that we know about January 6th. We're hoping to find out some more details in the coming future as we have a real January 6th committee. Anyways, I want to thank you for checking out this special weekend episode on January 6th, the most deadliest day ever. And I hope you follow and check this podcast out again. Like I said, I'm just doing this for fun, my own entertainment, a little bit of self-growth, learning how to focus my thoughts. But most importantly, don't forget to go out and volunteer for something important and meaningful. And don't forget to always try and spark the conversation.